This is Kesubos Daf Peites. We're holding on the bottom of Peiches Beis. We're going to slowly try to get all these shurim up in anticipation of Yom Kippur and ultimately Sukkot and Mirza Hashem. So on the bottom line of Peiches Beis, we begin a new Mishnah that says the Mishnah Hoyitzia get ve'eni mo ksuba. What is the story if a woman wants to come into Beis Din to collect her ksuba, but the problem is she does not have a ksuba? So Rashi right away points out that we assume the case is she said, I lost my shtar ksuba. She walks into Beis Din holding a get, showing she's a divorced woman, and she wants to collect her ksuba. She doesn't have a ksuba. So what do we do in such a scenario? As we turn over to Peites Amud Aleph of today's daf, Kovek Ksuvasa. Says the Mishnah, she's able to collect her ksuba. And Rashi says, and the husband can't say, I paid you, as we'll see more in the Gemara. Actually, let's see a little bit more in Rashi, very important. Rashi says, why can't the husband say that? B'sham Tanai ksuba is Maisa Beis Din Hu. Very big line in Rashi, that the husband cannot say he paid her and he gave her back the ksuba. Why not? Even though normally when someone comes to collect and he doesn't have a shtar, he's not believed. Over here, the woman is yes believed. The reason is, Rashi's explaining, because it is a Maisa Beis Din Hu. And therefore, since this is a scenario that every single person has to pay, therefore she's able to collect even without the ksuba. We're going to see more ramifications of this din in the Gemara in Mirza Hashem. Continues the Mishnah. Ksuba v'eni maget. What happens if she shows up to Beis Din? She's holding a ksuba, but she doesn't have a get. So he oimeres. What does she claim about giti? I'm a divorced woman. I just don't have my get. V'oimer avad shaivri. And the husband says, no, I paid your ksuba. I just don't have the receipt showing that I paid you. A shayvar is a receipt that one receives when he pays up a shtar. So the husband says, I paid up my shtar, I paid up the ksuba. I just don't have the receipt. Similarly, v'chein ba'al chayv, shayitzi shtar chayv eni moi prosbol. Very time relevant halacha. Everyone just before Rosh Hashanah created a prosbol. So what happens if someone comes over to someone else after this year, and this could happen today? Someone says Yomi money and he shows him a shtar, but the eni moi prosbol, he doesn't have the prosbol document which allows one to collect a debt after Shemitah. Hareilu lo yiparu. In both of these cases, both the case of the Gerisha, that she does not have she has the ksuba without the get, as we saw on the top of the Amid, that she has the ksuba, should have the get, or in the case he has the shtar chayiv without the prosbol. Hareilu lo yiparu. Comes along Rashbag and from the time of a saikana, and as Rashi is going to teach, as the Gemara is going to teach, Rashi already teaches, that the guy made a takana, they cannot keep mitzvahs. So people are afraid to keep their gittin, to keep their prosbols, because that shows that you're keeping religion. Then then the fact that you don't have to get to the prosbol doesn't mean anything, because you don't have it because of the sakana. Let's just see one important Rashi. Prosbol, it's very relevant. Everyone would discuss prosbol last week. Everyone hopefully made a prosbol. So Rashi quotes the Gemara in Gina Daf Lamed Daled that Hillel iskin prosbol. Hillel made a takana to create a prosbol kedei shaloi tishamei shvius, because normally Shemitah comes along and cancels all debts. And the reason Hillel created a prosbol, how does it work? It's considered as if the shtar is given over to Beis Din. That the borrower can collect the debt whenever he wants. The hashta loy karinam be loy yi gois. Loy yi gois is this is a right to collect a loan after it is paid. After Shemitah, comes along and cancels the debt. So in such a scenario that you create a prosbol, you're allowed to collect the debt. Why? Because the mechanics of a prosbol create that you are not the one being taiveya. You are not the one claiming to get back a loan. It's Beis Din That's the mechanics of a prosbol, that it's as if you're giving over the shtar to Bezdin, and Bezdin is the one that is collecting the debt on your behalf. And how is Bezdin able to do it? Shafkir and Afkir Veim Yardan Uchasa, Bezdin is able to remove properties from a person, and that is the mechanics of a prosbol. A loaded Rashi, but again, very relevant as we just finished the Shemitah year ourselves. And also, just once we're mentioning it, another halacha which is going to be very relevant to anyone who's traveling to Eretz Yisrael, still, the Shemitah is very, very relevant, as you have to be careful with the produce in the markets, as the produce in the market is still from last year, as Sirayim, similarly, etc. And we begin the Gemara, that we begin discussing the first din in the Mishnah, that a woman who comes into Bezdin, that she had a get, and she had no ksuba, and we said in the top line of the summit, she's allowed to collect ksuba for what reason? Because it's a Maisa Bezdin who. So says the Gemara, Shema Mina, you know what we see from our Mishnah? Kaisvin Shaivar. You see from our Mishnah that we do write a Shaivar. Now this is a large discussion. Do we know write a Shaivar? What is the discussion? The discussion is that a Shaivar is a receipt showing that you paid up a debt. And the problem with writing a Shaivar is that then it has to be held on to. You have to hold on to the receipt showing that you paid. So seemingly from our Mishnah, for the fact that we're allowing the woman to collect the ksuba without the ksuba, the reason being is that the husband should have had a shaivar showing that he paid. And this big Rashi is really where it discusses it. So says the Gemara, seemingly we see from our Mishnah that you write a shaivar. And Rashi points out, this is a sigya on Babasar Kufay and Aleph, that we hold like the Mandarma that says we do not write a shaivar, which really means that our Gemara is asking a kasha. Shmami, no, kaisvin shaivar. Should we bring a proof from our Mishnah that we yet write? Yes, write a shaivar. Why? What's the proof? Din kaisvin shaivar. Because if you do not write such a receipt, lechosh, we should be suspectful. Maybe what's going to happen? Maybe this woman is going to take out her ksuba after her husband dies. They gav yaba and collect with it a second time. Because if there's no shaivar, if there is no receipt, then we have to be concerned that the woman is going to collect today without her ksuba, and then 6 months or whatever amount of time the husband will be nifter, and the woman's going to come back into Bezdin holding the ksuba and collect the ksuba the second time. So rather, from the fact that we see we allow her to collect must be, what's the reason? The reason is Kaisin Shaivar, that we write the husband, and by extension his estate will have the Shaivar, have the receipt showing that he paid, and therefore there will be no concern. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav, there's no raya from our Mishnah. Why not? Our Mishnah is discussing a scenario. There were different minhagim, different places in Klal Yisrael. And our Mishnah is discussing a place that they wouldn't write a ksuba. And since that place never wrote a ksuba, we never have to be worried that the woman is going to go and collect the ksuba a second time by taking out the ksuba, because she never had a ksuba. That's the answer of Rav. Ushmuel Amar, says Shmuel 10 lines down of Peites and Aleph, the first word of the line is Amar, Af b'makiv shekaisvin ksuba. No, the Mishnah could be discussing even a place with a yes wrote a ksuba. Ask the Gemara, Shmuel, if that's true that the Mishnah is discussing a place where they write a ksuba, kaisvin shaivar. So according to Shmuel, we have a raya that you write a shaivar. Answers the Gemara, no, raya Amar Avanan l'didim of Arshilem in Eid Shmuel. For me, it was explained in the name of Shmuel b'makayim shein kaisvin, that we're discussing a place that where they generally do not write a ksuba. Ve'amar, and in that place that the general minhag, the general populace does not write a ksuba, the husband comes along and he claims kasafti. The husband claims I wrote a ksuba. So what's the halach if the husband claims he wrote a ksuba, even though people generally do not? Allah aviraya. It's upon the husband to bring a proof that he indeed wrote the ksuba. And if he cannot bring a proof that he wrote a ksuba, then he has to pay the ksuba, and then he'll accept the receipt. So not necessarily is our Mishnah a raya in general to a shaivar, because our Mishnah is a unique scenario. And furthermore, in a place where they yes write ksubas generally, va'amra like asavli. And in such a scenario, the woman comes and says, guess what? I never got a ksuba. Then it's upon her to bring a proof that she was not given a ksuba. And if she has a proof, the husband has to pay her. So what do we see? Says the Gemara, the din in the Mishnah can be applicable both in places that they do and they do not write a ksuba. And that is how Shmuel will explain the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues and comments, Rav Adar Bey, and even Rav was Chayzer. Rav originally answered, says the Gemara, Rav was Chayzer and held like Shmuel. Whether they did not or did not write a ksuba, get goiva ikr, ksuba goiva taisefes. Says Rav that in such a scenario, whether the minhag is to yes write a ksuba, whether the minhag is to not write a ksuba, if she has a get that only allows her to collect the ikr, the main mana or meisayim, 100 or 200 of a ksuba, ksubasa, and then if she has the ksuba document, then koiba taisefes, she could get the additional parts. And Rav says, and if you want to ask a question on that which I'm saying, come and ask a question. Says the Gemara, guess what? That's indeed what we're going to do. We're going to ask a kasha on that which Rav said. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, our Mishnah, ksuba v'eni maget, what is the halacha? If she comes in with the ksuba without a get, she says, I lost my get, I lost my receipt. The Mishnah said, what's the halacha? The woman, the Baal Chayv cannot collect. So now the Gemara articulates the question, according to Shmuel, we could explain that this part of the Mishnah is going in a place, that they did not write generally a ksuba. And the husband, the Baal Chayv, came along and said, Kosafti. And they said that in such a scenario, we indeed did write it. The Amri Lay, we say to him, I see Raya, bring a proof. Vilom, I see Raya, Amri Lay, Zil Pare. You have to go and play. So according to Shmuel, there's a way to explain the end of the Mishnah. Elo Rav. But says the Gemara, according to Rav, who says that when a woman brings out a get, she gets the Iker Ksuba. When she brings the Ksuba, she gets the Taisefes. So how do we learn the end of the Mishnah? Nei Iker, like Avi, I understand she's not going to get the Iker Ksuba. Why not? Because she didn't collect Iker. Because she doesn't have the actual get with her. But I asked the Gemara, 3 lines on the bottom, Taisefes, Mia Gavye. She should be able to get the Taisefes. Because Rav said a klal. Rav said a rule. Anytime a woman comes in with the ksuba, she's able to collect the ksefes. So how do we learn the end of the Mishnah? According to Rav, explains the Gemara. Omar Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef, askinon. The case over here, what are we referring to? Kishayin sham ede girishin. The case is where she comes in holding her ksuba, she does not have a get, and there are no eidim saying that she was divorced. So in that scenario, that's when the Mishnah said she cannot collect her ksuba, even though she's holding the actual ksuba, which Rav just taught us generally allows her to collect the teisefes, but because she does not have Eidei Gerishin, she cannot collect. Why? Because you know what the husband could claim, I never divorced you. You don't have any Eidin that it was a divorce. You don't have any get. So because the husband, as we turn over to Beit Testament base, is able to say, I never divorced you. Therefore, he's allowed to say a good old-fashioned migu, that I did divorce her, but I already paid her ksuba. So says the Gemara, the same for the Mishnah is not a kasha on Rav, because the case is referring to one in which there are no eidim in which there are no eidim testifying that she was a divorced woman, and therefore the husband has a good old-fashioned Migu. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Hamektani Seifa. What did the Mishnah conclude? The Mishnah concluded by teaching us that says Rav Shimon Gamliel from the time of the Zakana that they were not allowing Yidden to keep mitzvahs, and therefore they would not keep around their get, they would not keep around the prosbol. What's the halacha? The halacha is you could collect a ksuba without the get, you collect the balchay without a prosbol. That has to askinon. That has to be a case that they're actually edim. Why? Because if there were no edim gerushin, then why in the sefer are we saying that they collect? Just because they're coming along and saying Zashasakana without any edim, they're not going to let you collect. So says the Gemara, seemingly from the sefer of the Mishnah, we should be able to learn that there are Eidei Gerushin, and therefore you cannot explain that in the Reisha of the Mishnah, Rav is going to teach you the case is that there were no Eidim, and therefore the husband could say, just like I could theoretically claim I didn't divorce you, I should be believed to say, I paid your ksuba. Answers the Gemara, no, that's not a kasha. 6 lines down, El Kula Rashbagi, really the entire Mishnah is Rav Shimon Gamliel. And the Mishnah is saying, lacking a few words. Now let's understand what the Mishnah is talking about. In the Mishnah, if she has a ksubo that a get, or the case of the Baal Chayv, what's the halacha lo yiparu? They cannot collect. When is that? Meaning we add those words in. The way that Rav wanted to explain the Mishnah, says the Gemara, read it into the Mishnah. But what if there are Eidim? Then Gavya, they could collect. She gets the Teisefes, the Iker, and what about the principal part of the Ksuba? Imafka Gita Gavya. If she has the get itself, she collects. V'loy mafka Gita loy Gavya. Back into the reading of the Mishnah. Why? He's going to be able to. So that is how we're going to explain the Mishnah and a kafeh, both according to Rav, adding and according to Shmuel. Continues the Gemara about 15 lines down. The first word of the line is beget. Amri lei. Now that we understand that Rav Kafir with the Mishnah asks the Gemara. Amri Rav Kana Ravasi l'Rav. Lidi dachta Amri. According to you, that you said get kove ikar almana min asuin b'may gavyo. According to you, Rav. Again, what was the klal of Rav? The klal of Rav was that if a woman holds a get, she gets the ikar. If the woman is holding the ksuba, she gets the sefes. So asks Rav Kana and Ravasi, 1 second. Almana min nisuin. A woman that is widowed, her husband dies after nisuin. B'may gavya. How does she collect her ksuba? Beidei misa. She collects by bringing edim, bringing witnesses that her husband died. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Says the Gemara, why are we not worried that maybe really this woman is a divorced woman? And today she's going to collect with Aiden that her husband died. And and at a later date she's going to go to a different bezdin, pull out her get and collect. According to you, Rav, that holding on to the get is itself proof to collect. Why are you not concerned of such a case? Answers the Gemara, no. The case that Almana only collects is in a scenario, she only collects her ksuba with holding the get is if we know that her husband was around. And not in a scenario that her husband is no longer around. Ask the Gemara 1 second. How do you know? Maybe close to when he died, he divorced her. Explains the Gemara, it could be, but if that was indeed the scenario, the husband should have notified people that he divorced her, and if he did not, he's causing loss upon himself and his estate. As Rav Kana Ravasi further, what about a case where a woman's husband dies after Erisin? With what does she collect her ksuba? Beidei misa. So again, maybe they're really divorced and she'll pull out the get a later date and collect the ksuba twice. Ela b'makayin d'lo yefshar kaisvin shayver. So today's discussion really was one large discussion of shayver, and says the Gemara, after all is said and done, if there is a scenario that it is impossible, then indeed we will, yes, write a shayver. And explains the Gemara 7 lines from the white lines. If you're not going to say that, then in the case of Eidei Misa, why are we suspectful? Then maybe she'll collect in this bezdin, then she'll go and collect in another bezdin. In such a scenario, when it's impossible, we're going to indeed write a shayver, and that will be something that everyone will agree to. Continues the Gemara, 2 lines from the white lines. The case that we just discussed, Minalan. From where do you know that in such a scenario she collects her Minalan disla ksuba? How do you know she gets a ksuba? If you're going to tell me, learn it from the Mishnah that says, on the second white line, maybe that's only referring to a case where he wrote her a ksuba. But if the husband did not write her a ksuba, maybe an arusa would not get the ksuba. But if you can tell me that's a scenario, what's the chiddush? So he's coming to say, not like Rav Elazar ben Azariah. He didn't write her a ksuba only on condition that he didn't isuin, and therefore that would be the chiddush. Tekenami, and this is precise. Teketani goyves hakol. So yeah, Misham de kasla mishamachi goyves hakol. Eliyamer like kasla my goyves hakol. Mana masaimu disla. You only get 1 or 200. Says the Gemara, very good. But 1 second, ve'ela. Midetani Rav Chiva Rav Nishtei Arusal Einim v'lemetamela. If a woman does only irisin, she does not have the dinam of a ninos. The husband does not have a dinam of a ninos. V'lemetamela. The husband does not become tummy for her if the husband was a kayin. V'chein, and similarly, she does not become a nayin. She does not become tummy to him. Meisa, if she's nifter, ina yersha. If she is nifter, he does not inherit her. Meisu, if he dies, goyvik subasa, she does get a ksuba. So says the Gemara, Dilmo de Kasava, maybe we should say the same thing. It's only referring to a case where a husband on his own went and obligated himself, even only after Erisin. But in reality, in general, there's no chiyav after Erisin. There still is a chiddush. The chiddush is that when she dies, he does not inherit her. And therefore, says the Gemara, we do not have a clear mikar that an arusa, that is an almana, that her husband dies, that she collect her ksuba. We finish off today's shir. Says the Gemara, one last kasha on the din of Rav Amalei, Rav Nachman, Rav Huna. We're 5 lines from the Mishnah. The Rav Damar get goy ve'ikr. According to Rav, that anytime she pulls out her get, she collects the main part, the mana masayim of ksuba. Why are we worried? Vigavia, that she'll take the get in this bezdin and go to another bezdin and collect again. If you're going to tell me they rip up the get, what do you mean? She's going to say, don't rip up my get. I need this get as proof that I'm a divorced woman so I can get remarried. Answers the Gemara, the Karina and Lay, they really rip up the get. And they write on to the get the following. Gita dinan karnu. We ripped up this woman's get. La mishon the Gita paslu. Now because it was paslu. So that she does not collect the second time. She holds on to that document, and that document will be her proof that she is indeed a divorced woman and she can get remarried, but will no longer have a concern. She'll collect the ksuba 2 times as the get was ripped up. We'll pick it up from the Mishnah on the next year.